Okay, hi everyone. So we are here together to do the favorite quotes tag created by Sailing Through Books, who also tagged both myself and Ami, right here. And so this has several prompts asking for favorite quotes. So the first one is a quote you return to in hard times. What about it comforts you?
I can go first.
Yep.
Um, I chose a chapter or a quote that I've heard Sailing Through Books discuss about on her channel before. It's the Bulkington chapter from Moby Dick. Are you familiar with that chapter? It's early Mo.
I don't know. Go ahead. How about ring bells as you go? Yeah.
So this is early before they set sail on the Pequod, and it's like the first time we hear sort of Ishmael slash Melville's like biblical poetic voice. It sort of like intrudes because at this point in the book, it's mostly just been like a buddy tale of Ishmael and Quake. And the context is he sees this character Bulkington in like a few successive chapters where he's coming back from a long sailing voyage, and in this chapter he's seeing him go back to sea, and he gives like a short chapter about like describing this character of Bulkington, and he says, "Wonderfulest things are ever the unmentionable. Deep memories yield no epitaphs. This 6-inch chapter is the stoneless grave of Bulkington." And then skipping a bit, he talks about how dangerous the voyage is and how Bulkington is like always like refuses to be safe like on land. He always wants to go back to sea. And this is the end of the chapter, like the final sentences. He says, "Know ye now, Bulkington, glimpses do you seem to see of that mortally intolerable truth, that all deep earnest thinking is but the intrepid effort of the soul to keep the open independence of her seas, while the wildest winds of heaven and earth conspire to cast her on the treacherous slavish shore? But as in landlessness alone resides highest truth, shoreless, indefinite as God, so better it is to perish in that howling infinite than to be ingloriously dashed upon the lee, even if that were safety. For worm-like, then, oh, who would crave and crawl to land? Terrors of the terrible. Is all this agony so vain? Take heart, O Bulkington. Bear thee grimly, demigod. Up from the spray of thy ocean perishing, straight up leaps thy apotheosis." That's the quote.
Wow. Now, I think the first one you read that ended with epitaph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
deep memories yield no epitaph. I feel like that rang a big bell for me. I think that was a quote I really liked from Moby Dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
So I should give a last thought about this quote because the question is like the prompt's like why. Um, it's if I don't know if this answers the question of why it's a comforting quote, but I just want to say about this quote that it feels extremely Nietzschean. That Nietzsche, the way I read him, I think the way most people read him is like he sort of also romanticizes and sort of valorizes this sort of self-transcendence of eschewing safety, like the theme of eschewing comfort, eschewing safety, and living to your fullest potential in peril. Like Nietzsche romanticizes peril. And this language at the end, he says, he calls him Bear the Grimly Demigod, and straight up leaps by apotheosis. I Googled to learn that apotheosis literally means deification. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
And I think, again, this language is like really, for me, remarkably mirrors like the idea of the Superman.
Mm.
You know, like this,
Yeah.
I think there's like an amazing concordance there between what Ishmael's saying and what Nietzsche saw. And so it's like this exhortation to challenge yourself, to sort of go beyond yourself, to bear the suffering of life, and in that to find a kind of redemption. That's my answer.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Forgive me. I have three things.
Please.
One of them is two of them are very short. One of them is an entire poem, but
We shouldn't apologize for being lengthy here. This is what we're here for.
yeah, that's the point of the tag. So the first quote I thought of was the very first quote I thought of when I heard the first prompt. So I figure I would have to use it. So, it's a relatively short quote from Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, which is a Russian novel which has been called the War and Peace of the 20th century for people who aren't familiar. And the quote is this. Human history is not the battle of good struggling to overcome evil. It is a battle fought by a great evil struggling to crush a small kernel of human kindness. But if what is human in human beings has not been destroyed even now, then evil will never conquer. I So I find this comforting because it's easy to just be a little bit overwhelmed by how powerful such evil people and evil forces in the world seem. And I feel like this quote doesn't shy away from that. It's just like, yeah, sorry, like the evil people often are the people with billions of dollars who can stomp you down. And that's just how it is. But if we hold on to these small, human kindnesses that it refers to, then it'll never fully win, right? Eventually it will come tumbling down. It may come tumbling down in the most disastrous way possible for a lot of people, but it will. And there's a sort of optimism in that, I guess. The thing is funny because I read this quote in the novel, but I was aware of the quote before I read the novel, Life and Fate. I heard the quote from Chris Hedges, who is a writer who I haven't really read any of his books. I've read a couple of his articles and watched some interviews, and he just said that he quoted this passage in order to sort of critique the widespread like fetishization of quote unquote hope. He said something like, "I don't share our culture's propensity for hope," and then quotes this passage. And so I feel inclined not to say that it's hopeful, but it is sort of in a way optimistic. I don't know. So I don't know if that made much sense. The second quote is very short. It's just a fragment, one line from a poem. The quote is just look to the living, love them, and hold on. That's all it is. So very very simple. It's from a poem called Disenchantments by a Scottish poet named Douglas Dunn. I confess I have read the poem and the book it's from, but I didn't really like any of the other poems, or even much of the rest of the poem that this is from. But this quote has like it's always just something I think of when times are tough, And so then the last one is a full poem, and it's by Emily Dickinson. I feel like Emily Dickinson could have been a lot of my quotes for this tag.
Yeah, I thought that too.
But the poem is a pit but heaven over it. All right, and that's the first line, so I'll keep reading. A pit but heaven over it, and heaven beside, and heaven abroad, and yet a pit with heaven over it. To stir would be to slip, to look would be to drop, to dream, to sap the prop that holds my chances up. Ah, pit with heaven over it. The depth is all my thought. I dare not ask my feet. 'Twould start us where we sit, so straight you'd scarce suspect it was a pit, with fathoms under it. Its circuit just the same. Seed, summer, tomb, to whose doom, to whom? Those last couple lines are hard to read, with the tomb and the whom at the end. I love how it ends with a question too. So yeah. So those are some quotes I turn to when I need comfort. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love how it took different sort of approaches to that prompt.
Yeah.
For different time. But yeah.
Well, I was expecting to hear Moby Dick from you at some point in this. I have so. Number two, question or problem number two is a quote or two that sums up your philosophy of life.
I have a request. These quotes feel very personal to me, and they also feel related to the last prompt, which is something you want read at your funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So can we hold off on these quotes until the end?
The quotes that sum up our philosophy of life? Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. I felt there was a lot of cross-pollination.
I wanna come back to that, if that's okay. I want to do the last two to be philosophy on life and then funeral.
Okay. Sure, that's okay. I actually felt a lot of like cross-pollination between the what quotes I wanted to go where. So I agree with that. Okay. So we will move on to a quote you love because it's beautifully written. This is the hardest one because it's not you'd pick tons of things.
There's a lot of beautiful writing.
Yeah. So what did you come up with?
So I sort of had two different answers. I don't think I'll read both. I'll probably just pick one to read. But one was some really beautiful, stunning writing from Werner Herzog's A Twilight World. I just thought was super, super beautiful. And then another and that I think resonates true today. It's a book that I read in recent years, and I think it's just incredibly beautiful writing. And then something which is more true to like my life and biography, but a little awkward, is Cormac McCarthy, who is very problematic, as we all know. But maybe I'll just read the Cormac McCarthy quotes.
Okay.
So with his problematicness notwithstanding, I have two Cormac McCarthy quotes that I think are really beautiful, and they've like really stayed with me for much of my life, since like a big portion of my life since I first read him. So this is from Blood Meridian, and this is the judge, one of his sort of ideas and his philosophy of life. Says, "The truth about the world," he said, "is that anything is possible. Had you not seen it all from birth, and thereby bled it of its strangeness, it would appear to you for what it is, a hat trick in a medicine show, a fevered dream, a trance bepopulate with chimeras, having neither analog nor precedent, an itinerant carnival, a migratory tent show whose ultimate destination, after many a pitch in many a muddied field, is unspeakable and calamitous beyond reckoning." So that's one. And the other one, which also is a quote that stayed with me a lot since I first read it, is the ending of The Road, which was a book that I was very affected by, and themes of parenthood. And it ends with this sort of mournful reflection on what was lost in this sort of calamitous post-apocalyptic dystopian vision of our planet. And he ends the book saying, "Once there were brook trout in the streams in the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current, where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torzoinal." I always trip up on that word. Torzoinal, I think is.
I don't know that word. Yeah.
"On their backs were vermaculate patterns that were maps of the world and its becoming, maps and mazes of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery." That's it.
Yeah. I love that. I love the ending of The Road. I don't have the passage memorized or anything, but I could like feel that passage because I remembered it was about fish, and I remember how the last word was mystery.
Yeah.
I love that the last word of the entire novel is mystery. Yeah, cool. So yeah, as far as what I picked, I have two possibilities. I'll take a page out of your book. One of them I have already read out loud to you because it's from Malone Dies by Stanzel Becca, and I think it's just long. It is so beautiful. I wanted to read it aloud, but I think for the sake of time, since I have already read it aloud, I will maybe I'll read the first few sentences of it. All right, and then I'll stop myself. All right. It'll remind you of which quote it is, and it'll give people here a taste, because not everyone who's watching this will have seen our discussion. So here's the opening of it. All right. "My body does not yet make up its mind, but I fancy it weighs heavier on the bed, flattens and spreads. My breath, when it comes back, fills the room with its din, though my chest moves no more than a sleeping child's. I open my eyes and gaze unblinkingly and long at the night sky. So a tiny tot I gaped, first at the novelties, then at the antiquities. Between it and me the pain, misted and smeared with the filth of years. I should like to breathe on it, but it is too far away. It is such a night as Caspar David Friedrich loved, tempestuous and bright. That name that comes back to me, those names. The clouds scud, tattered by the wind, across a limpid ground." I'll stop there. So yeah, and I got through the image in it that I love the most, which is the misted pane of the window, and the reference to Caspar David Friedrich, which he did that painting with the one guy standing on the big looking down on a mountain, right? Which is often, I feel like people often reference that painting when they're talking about Nietzsche, because they can give it that as like an Ubermensch kind of thing. But that is a beautiful passage from Malone Dies. I won't read the whole thing though. The other one, from a very different book. The other one is from the book that used to be my favorite book. I still love it, but it's not quite my favorite anymore. It's from The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. And This is just a passage that reminds me of something from Homer or the narrative parts of the Bible, but in particular the Old Testament, like with David and Goliath and all that. It just reads like an ancient epic, but written by someone in the 20th century, of course. And this is an elf named Fingolfin, sallying forth to challenge the Dark Lord Morgoth to a single combat, knowing he will lose. Right. So it's a paragraph. So I'll read it. Now news came to Hithlum that Dorthonion was lost, and the sons of Finarfin overthrown, and that the sons of Feanor were driven from their lands. Then Fingolfin beheld, as it seemed to him, the utter ruin of the Noldor, and the defeat beyond redress of all their houses. And filled with wrath and despair, he mounted upon Rochalor, sorry, that's the name of his horse, Rochalor, his great horse, and rode forth alone, and none might restrain him. He passed over Dor Newfauglith like a wind amid the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Orome himself was come, for a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Thus he came alone to Angman's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once more upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It feels like Homeric.
Yeah. It's Homeric. It's also very much invokes like the King James Bible.
Yeah.
It's really a wonderful, underrated, underread book, I think. A good alternative to the Lord of the Rings, if maybe you're sick of the Lord of the Rings, I guess. All right, so it's number 4 in the tag, but we're doing it third.
Mm-hmm.
This is a poem you've memorized, and why you chose to memorize it.
Is it possible to pull up Howl by Allen Ginsberg on your machine?
Yes.
Because I only accidentally brought like 2 sentences from Howl, and just wanted to read a little more.
It's a long poem.
I know, I'm not gonna read the whole thing. Cool. Thanks. So to answer the prompt, I'll say that I haven't spent a lot of time in my adult years committing poetry to memory. There's been some of it that's like almost committed to memory because like rattled around my brain for so long and never visited for so long. So this is sort of a hard one for me. Because again, like I said, it's not such intentional memorization on my part. But I do have like a recollection of going on a hike with some friends and how just like bouncing in my brain for whatever reason. It was very nice. It was a beautiful hike and it was in nature and these words are so compelling to me. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high sat up smoking the supernatural darkness of cold water flats floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz, who bared their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement rooftops illuminated. I won't stop there. So I certainly don't know all this by heart, but I have, the words and the images and the energy has often been rattling in my brain. So yeah, it's my answer.
Cool. Yeah. And no, I know Howl is good. I actually lingered. I didn't pick it, but I did linger on myself on an Allen Ginsberg poem, a different one. But the poem that I have picked, I thought it was interesting what you said about not spending necessarily much time like deliberately memorizing poetry, but most poetry that you've memorized has been like naturally through just revisiting poems, and I think that is the best way to memorize poems. I think that's the best way to memorize a poem rather than sitting down and saying, okay, I'm gonna like read through it and quiz myself on the poem, and because I have found that generally when I sit down to memorize a poem, it usually takes me like an afternoon, depending on how long the poem is, right? Every poem I've memorized has only been probably no longer than the equivalent of like a Shakespearean sonnet, right? Like I've never memorized a really long poem. But whenever I have sat down and just deliberately memorized a poem like that, I'll retain it for a while, and I still usually hold on to fragments, but eventually it just falls out, right? If you don't recite it constantly, you don't use it, you don't keep it, whereas the poems that I hold on to, and I don't have very many of them, but the poems that I hold on to that I have memorized very strongly are the ones where, I either read them over and over again or listened to them over and over again, and eventually I just found it was like, oh wow, I guess I have it memorized now, because I would think back to it, you know what I mean? This poem is not one like that, but it was one that I did deliberately memorize, right? And this is One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. This is one of her most famous poems. Definitely one of the best poems ever written. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm
dear. Well, I am excited to introduce you to it.
great.
Yeah, and it's a good poem to memorize because it's a villanelle, which is a form based on a lot of repetition. But again, a really powerful poem, which also could fulfill some of the other prompts for this tag. So here is One Art. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost, that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day. Accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names, and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and, vaster, some realms I owed, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's a good, it's one of my favorite poems. I do read it a lot. I probably should have it memorized given how much I read it, but yeah, it's definitely one of the best poems ever, I think. So yeah, and why I chose to memorize it, I guess I didn't talk about that. I mean, for one thing, it's good to memorize a villanelle because there's a lot of repetition, which makes it a bit easier. But this poem, I mean, again, this poem could have been a good poem for the first prompt, a quote to return to in hard times, because it's about losing, it's about loss. And so it's a good poem to have in your pocket for when you need it for that reason, So I guess I'll go with that.
Yeah, beautiful.
So our next one is one that I struggled with. So I'm particularly curious about what you came up with for this one. This is a quote that captures how you feel about love or friendship.
Do you want to switch the order? You want to go first? Another thing?
Okay, yeah. So I had 2 quotes.
Mm-hmm.
They both, I guess they do speak to each other, but they have very different takes on this topic. So this is also a really hard comp for me, just because I don't know. It's like it's hard to boil down what one thinks about love or friendship to one quote, right? But anyway, first quote I have here is from Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, and it's this: "Love is holy because it is like grace. The worthiness of its object is never really what matters." Right, that's the first one, and
That's a beautiful quote.
yeah, I'll leap right in the second one, and then I'll comment. And this is from Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry.
Yeah.
I'm actually just realizing that both of these are novels that won the Pulitzer Prize, which I did not, it was not intentional, but, so the quote is, "The boy's face lit up as if he had just been given a new saddle. He had practically worshipped Jake Spoon once, and would clearly be willing to again, given the encouragement. Augustus felt a momentary pang. He liked Jake, but felt him to be too leaky a vessel to hold so much hope. But then all vessels leaked to some degree." And so I'll start with the Larry McMurtry one and work backwards. So the thing that bugged me when I watched the miniseries adaptation of Lonesome Dove, even though I mostly liked it, was that they took this quote, which was like my favorite quote from the book, and they made it a line of dialogue, actually, and they made it like a joke for some reason. which I found very strange. Maybe it is supposed to be a joke, but I don't read it as a joke. But anyway, so that's just a small note. But I so the first quote, "Love is holy because it is like grace." I want to say that for me, that quote feels partially aspirational more than like it's something that I adhere to very well all the time, because I think one of my foibles as a human is that I do sometimes fall into viewing relationships, friend relationships, family relationships, romantic, as to a degree transactional, which I don't feel like they should be at their heart. And yet I do find myself sometimes just having these thoughts that I know are not great thoughts of like, well, I did this for that person. Why can't they do likewise now, right? Or why is it that I'm always the one bending over backwards for them? Or, why did I do this for them, but they never do anything for me? Or, this, that, and the other thing. Or why did I spill out my guts to them? And then they just sort of like, oh, okay, thanks. Or whatever. I do fall into that trap of viewing relationships as somewhat transactional. And this quote feels like a good uh aspirational in the sense that it encourages one to, or not necessarily encourages one, but says that real love doesn't necessarily have to do with the person you love being worthy of love. And it also reminds me of another quote, which I can sort of quote from memory, which is actually from a film, which I wasn't going to talk about, but now that it's come to my head, at the end of the film, it's a film called A River Runs Through It. It stars Brad Pitt among some others, less well known, but a pastor is giving a sermon, and he says, we can love completely without complete understanding. That's what he says about, in reference to a son of his who died, and that makes me, I feel very similarly about that quote as this one. And then the second one, right, is sort of a similar idea, right? Often people love others who are leaky vessels, but then he says all vessels leak to some degree,
Yeah.
right? Everyone at some point is gonna hurt you because they're a leaky vessel. No one's ever gonna be perfect, and that's part of what being in any kind of relationship is. And I don't mean being in a relationship just like romantic, but any like friendship, parent, child, sibling, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I found this to be a difficult prompt to respond to, but those are my two quotes.
Beautiful. It was a really beautiful quote. I also found it challenging. My quote is from Mishnah, which is an early codification of Jewish law from I think the 2nd century or something. And when I was young, growing up in Orthodox Jewish world, it was a big part of my education from a young age. And a lot of it is legalistic debate stuff about Jewish law. And there's one book of Mishnah, which is it's called Ethics of the Fathers, and it's less legalistic and it's more like how to live. It's more just like advice for life. And it's interesting to read it with new eyes as an adult, less invested in sort of the tradition in some ways. And I think a lot of it holds up rather nicely as sort of wisdom text, from that time period. So this is very early on in that book of Ethics of the Fathers. And it's something which, stuck with me from a young age. I'll first read in Hebrew. Might as well. Yeshua ben Parsha v'nitai ha'arbali kiblu mehem. So these are names of some rabbis, and it's talking about tradition. So they received this tradition from the previous rabbis. Yeshua ben Parsha Omer, this rabbi says, Asel harav, you should make for yourself a teacher, ukanel chaver, and buy for yourself, basically acquire a friend. And the last piece is Behavedan ekol adam kafskut, and judge everyone favorably. So the juxtaposition of finding a teacher and buying, like acquiring for yourself a friend, so if it's transactional, I think is actually quite wise. That the sense of friendship is so important. Friendship is so necessary for our well-being in the world that it's something you should invest it. Whether that be time, money. It's it should be a priority. You know what I'm saying? I think that I think that's sort of the point. And then the other point is judging everyone favorably. I think is also good advice. But sort of might take it a little bit further or use slightly different words or have a slightly different take on it. But I think friendship like your quotes sort of say, it's about really love and acceptance, and more than just judging people favorably. But I think those two things could be related.
Mm.
So that is basically my quote about friendship, and I'll just add as like a footnote. I think Moby Dick, like part of the brilliance and power and beauty of Moby Dick, is that this our narrator Ishmael is so full of love, and he's just brimming with this love and like friendship. And the book opens with his friendship with Quake Quake, which is like such a powerful, compelling description of male friendship. At a time, by the way, when this is antebellum America, when there's literally African American slaves in the country, he befriends this black-skinned South Islander, and describes getting strange looks as they walk through the streets holding hands. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he's just and that friendship sustained throughout the book until Quakewood dies. And and also like the squeeze of the sperm, like Ishmael's like a just this such a unique character because he's so full of that love. And from that place of love, I think friendship is is so natural to him.
Yeah. That's really fascinating in the Hebrew when you first were reading it, you said to buy a friend or something. Yeah, it sounds that's really fascinating. That's jarring.
It is intended to be jarring. Like
Yeah.
it was written in a way which is like it's jarring on the ears, and it's like not a common expression.
Yeah.
But it's like literally I read it as invest, pay money, whatever you have to do to like make sure that
Yeah.
you have friendship.
Yeah, I mean the thing is I'm guessing it's just an awkward translation. I'm guessing in Hebrew it doesn't have the same connotations as in English. When you say you buy a friend to an English, if you were to just say that out of context, in English, people would think, oh, so like buy people things,
Better
yeah,
sensation.
of,
But but in the Hebrew, connect would be used for purchasing.
yeah, but that's the thing. Like when you,
The translation doesn't necessarily sound the same.
yeah, but to maintain friendship, especially to maintain and make friendship in adulthood, it does kind of take more work than it did when you were in like high school and we just saw people a day, or in college where you see people around. And so you can see that as transactional, right? You are paying for friendship by like reaching out and going to where they are and figuring out things to do when you hang out and all this, So, yeah. So anyway, that's so interesting. Yeah. Cool. All right. Next one is a quote that makes you feel seen. Do you want me to go first again?
Go for it.
Okay. So, funnily enough, I have this notebook where I occasionally copy down by hand things that I like in particular. I don't update it as frequently as I would like, as it's only not even quite half full. But one quote that I did copy down by hand, and I'm a little bit stunned that this was what came to mind, but it was the very first thing I thought of. So, and I couldn't think of any others. So I just went with it. And this is from On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Is this a book you've read?
No.
Okay. The book as a whole was a somewhat mixed experience, but the parts of it that hit home really, really hit home for me, right? So the book is about this teenage boy who is Vietnamese American, basically coming to terms with his sexuality, sort of having a quasi-romantic entanglement with this slightly older guy for the first time, struggling with his mother who seems not to fully accept him, and also struggling with the fact that the man who he's in this quasi-relationship with is a junkie and all sorts of things. But this is a passage that in the book happens like the day after the narrator, the main character, and this guy have had sex for the first time. So basically he's lost his virginity, right? And this is the passage. Right. He's coming out of the shower for some context, right? So I turned the shower off, and instead of toweling and dressing before the steam on the door mirror cleared like I normally would, I waited. It was an accident. My beauty revealed to me. I was daydreaming, thinking about the day before, of Trevor and me behind the Chevy, and had stood in the tub with the water off for too long. By the time I stepped out, the boy before the mirror stunned me. Who was he? I touched the face, its sallow cheeks. I felt my neck. The braid of muscles sloped to collarbones that jutted into stark ridges. The scraped-out ribs sunken as the skin tried to fill its irregular gaps. the sad little heart rippling underneath like a trapped fish, the eyes that wouldn't match, one too open, the other dazed, slightly lidded, cautious of whatever light was given it. It was everything I hid from, everything that made me want to be a sun, that the only thing I knew that had no shadow. And yet I stayed. I let the mirror hold those flaws, because for once, drying, they were not wrong to me, but something that was wanted, that was sought and found among a landscape as enormous as the one I had been lost in all this time. Because the thing about beauty is that it's only beautiful outside itself. Seen through a mirror, I viewed my body as another, a boy a few feet away, his expression unmoved, daring the skin to remain as it was, as if the sun setting was not already elsewhere, was not in Ohio. Wow. And this quote, as I read this novel for the first time, not long after realizing that I was gay and coming out to a lot of people, and I just read this, and it was one of the only passages I've ever read in a book where it felt like something I could have written. Not that I have the facility for words that Ocean Vuong has, but I could have written like I felt this exactly not long after coming out and starting to date men, and then so on and so forth. It was like for the first time I realized like what desire was and what attraction was, and that made me see myself a little bit differently, which was not something that I expected. Even as I privately came to the realization that I was gay, I was not expecting that experience after starting to explore it externally in dating and telling people. So that's kind of what this passage speaks to for me. Yeah.
Wow, it's a very powerful answer. Very personal. I don't. My answer won't be quite as personal or as powerful, but this was a hard prompt for me. But I decided to go with a excerpt, a poem from Leaves of Grass, some quotes from the poem "There Was a Child Went Forth" by Walt Whitman, and just some. I'm not gonna read the whole thing; it's a little lengthy, but it starts: "There was a child went forth every day, and the first object he looked upon, that object he became. And that object became part of him for the day or a certain part of the day, or for many years, or stretching cycles of years." Then if we get a very long enumeration of the things that Walt Whitman has seen and sort of experienced. And then this part was amazing because that it's very impersonal so far in the poem. And then he suddenly gets extremely personal in a way which is like so out of nowhere in Leaves of Grass. And it's like so incredible. This is Walt Whitman describing his experience. It's just like the things that he sees. He says, he's talking about himself in the third person. So his own parents, he that had fathered him and she that had conceived him in her womb and birthed him. They gave this child more of themselves than that. They gave him afterward every day. They became part of him. The mother at home, quietly placing the dishes on the supper table. The mother with her mild words, clean her cap and gown, a wholesome odor falling off her person and clothes as she walks by. The father, strong, self-sufficient, manly, mean, angered, unjust. The blow, the quick loud words, the tight bargain, the crafty lure, the family usages, the language, the company, the furniture, the yearning and swelling heart, right? So I'm not saying that I relate this because I have a mean father, but I'm saying that the fact that he sort of incorporates in his poems his traumas from childhood, and he just like, and the way this is part of me, I'm saying that, and his difficult relationship with his parents, like we all have, and he continues, the hurrying, tumbling waves, quick broken crests. This is after skipping a bit, so this is just more of the enumeration, right? Because we're not doing all the enumerations. Quick broken crests slapping the strata of colored clouds, the long bar of maroon tint away solitary by itself, the spread of purity it lies motionless in, the horizon's edge, the flying sea crow, the fragrance of salt marsh and shore mud. These became part of that child who went forth every day and who now goes and will always go forth every day. And these become of him or her that peruses them now. And so I just think that Walt Whitman is writing from this place of the permeable self. Like I just feel like so much of Leaves of Grass is about this profound sense that there's this permeability with the world and between people, and this like he's writing again from this place of love, also like Ishmael, I think, in a lot of ways, this place of like really incredible love for the world, and seeing sort of no boundary between himself and his experience, and ultimately the end, no boundary between me and you, the reader. That there's this beautiful linking of communication that I think Waltman like revels in, and I find that really really moving.
Yeah. The idea that all the diverse forms that we see and individuals that we see and objects that we see really underneath them are one thing.
Yeah.
That's a theme you see crop up in a lot of philosophical systems.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, I feel like I first encountered it in like Hindu philosophy. I was reading like the excerpt from the Upanishads and such like that. Speaking that, it's also implicit in maybe not quite Nietzsche, but definitely Schopenhauer, who was a big influence on Nietzsche. Anyway, but
I think I agree with what you're saying 100%. I think that there's a certain perspective, which is let's say a Walt Whitman perspective, which you can find in so many places. I would say, including Nietzsche, and it's hard to sort of put your finger on what that is. But part of it is a permeable self. Part of it is like a non-dual awareness experience of reality.
Yeah, that's cool. I need to check. That's not a Walt Whitman poem that I'm super familiar with, so I need to read up on this. All right, so we've arrived at the plants that we put off.
Yes.
All right, so this is a quote or two that sums up your philosophy of life.
Yes. This is a quote from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And I think it articulates a lot of what underscores, I think, the most important pillars of Nietzsche's philosophy, this particular quote. And just a caveat is Nietzsche, I think, also comes with a lot of baggage and a lot of nonsense, which is interesting to sort of grapple with. And there's a lot of things he's like very illiberal, anti-democratic, anti-feminist, all these interesting things. But that's not the part that attracts me to Nietzsche. But it's like this. It's like this is the stuff that attracts me to him, right? In exclusion to other things that don't attract me to him. So this is his Zarathustra character writing from this very prophetic voice. He says, "Ye higher men, what think ye? Am I a soothsayer, or a dreamer, or a drunkard, or a dream reader, or a midnight bell, or a drop of dew, or a fume and fragrance of eternity? Hear ye it not? Smell ye it not? Just now hath my world become perfect. Midnight is also midday. Pain is also joy. Curse is also a blessing. Night is also a sun. Go away, or you will learn that a sage is also a fool. Said ye ever yea to one joy? O my friends, then said ye yea also unto all woe. All things are enlaced, and enamored." Skip it. All joy wanted the eternity of all things. It wanted honey, it wanted lees, it wanted drunken midnight, it wanted graves, it wanted grave tears, consolation, it wanted gilded evening red. What doth not joy want? It is thirstier, hardier, hungrier, more frightful, more mysterious than all woe. It wanteth itself, it biteth itself. The ring's will writheth in it. It wanteth love, it wanteth hate. It is overrich, it bestoweth, it throweth away. It beggeth for someone to take from it. It thanketh the taker. It would fain be hated. So rich is joy that it thirsteth for woe, for hell, for hate, for shame, for the lame, for the world, oh, ye know it indeed. Okay, so there's lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
So there's a vision that Nietzsche has that I think he's writing from. I think he's writing from in a lot of his texts, but certainly it's the core of this vision of Zarathustra, which is this yes to life, right? He says, do you ever say yes to one joy? This is I think such a crux. Have you ever said yes to one joy? Then you said yes to everything, he says, right? Then said ye yea also unto all woe.
Mm-hmm.
All things are enlaced, and enamored. And I think this vision of the interlinking between joy and woe, this paradox, right? He says, so rich is joy that it thirsteth for woe, for hell, for hate, for shame. That all the manifestations of life, all the troubles of life, are intertwined. They're inextricably linked with the joy, and at the pillars of like Nietzsche's philosophy are like this yes to life, or this eternal return, that all of life is relived on repeat in a loop, because everything is sort of is perfect and unchangeable. I think sort of speaks to this vision that Nietzsche had of reality, which is, to me that's sort of central to my thinking also.
Yeah. Yeah. Dense. That's dense.
I'll say one more thing about it, unless you want to say something.
No, I love what it says. Sorry if I
Yeah, please take it.
I love what it says. Said ye ever yea to one joy, O my friends, and then said ye yea unto all woe.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That seems like the kernel of everything else.
Yeah, so much on Nietzsche's coming from that, because he's someone who suffered so much in his life, tremendous ailments, and he's writing from this place of saying yes to all of it. It also comes up in the Brothers Karamazov, in Ivan's Nightmare, with the devil. The devil tells him the story about a man who walked a quadrillion miles in the dark, and in the end, he's finally led into heaven, because that was like his purgatory. He had to walk a quadrillion miles in the dark, and when he arrives in heaven, there's the character in the story that the devil's telling says yes to all of it. Say I could have walked to the quadrillion power of miles. Everything was instantly redeemed, and that's like Nietzsche's message. It's like, there's a perfection, but it's like not for you, because it's not about you. It's a perfection that's beyond you.
Yeah. So sorry. A synapse that fired while you were talking about this. A interesting kind of counterpoint to all this Nietzschean stuff. There's a character because he's talking about purgatory. That's what set the synapse off. I thought of Dante's Purgatorio, all right? And there's one particular character from Dante's Purgatorio who Samuel Beckett really loved and references a lot. I think his name was Belacqua. I think his name is Belacqua. And he was a guy who, Purgatory is a mountain, right? You go up Mount Purgatory, and then once you're at the top, you can go up to heaven, right? But he never made any progress because he was just lazy, And so all this Nietzschean talk of like, you're going up Mount Purgatory is just like, then you have Belacqua just like, I can't be bothered. I'm done. And then you think of Beckett writing about how he just wanted silence, wanted to sit still, wanted to do nothing, wanted to be dead in a sense, and just couldn't bring himself to let it happen because he just kept writing and kept talking. There's when you were saying yes to life, right? There's the famous ending of James Joyce's Ulysses is famously is the last word of the whole novel is yes, is a woman saying yes, I will, yes. And probably he was taken from Nietzsche when he wrote that. Beckett has another novel, much less well known than Ulysses, called How It Is. It's one of my favorite books, and it kind of jokingly references Joyce, where at the end of the book the narrator says, "No, I won't, no," and then the book ends. Anyway, so just an interesting counterpoint to all the Nietzschean Ubermensch stuff is Beckett just being lazy, but then not ever being able to stop.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a long tangent, so I will leap right into mine.
Please go. Yeah.
So thankfully my quotes are relatively short. So my first one is one that I have loved since I first read it. And the quote is this. It's from the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And it is, "Men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them then, or bear with them." I have tried my best to live by that. Bear with people or teach them better. I will say, though, since becoming a professor and teaching undergraduates regularly, I have had my adherence to this principle sorely tested. I thought I was so good at keeping to it, and then I was like, well, I had no idea what it was like trying to teach 18-year-olds about its psychology or about statistics or whatever. But I still try. I do my best. And the second one is maybe I don't know. This one is a bit of a different take on the question, because it's not a philosophy of life insofar as it's about like how you're going to approach life actively. It's more a statement about like what life is, I guess. And you will be familiar with it because I told you about it once. But the quote is from a novel. It's from O Pioneers by Willa Cather. And it's this. "Isn't it queer? There are only 2 or 3 human stories, and they go on repeating themselves as fiercely as if they had never happened before, like larks in this country. that have been singing the same 5 notes over for thousands of years. And I find it really powerful, the idea that like there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that happens to us has happened before and will happen again. Similar to the eternal return, uh but for us, it's important. You know what I mean? Like the larks singing. I mean, and the person speaking in this novel is referring to these two teenage lovebirds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's again, a little bit like going back to my very first quote. Like it's a little bit pessimistic, but then still kind of life affirming, I feel like. Um, so
I think it's very Nietzschean.
yeah.
Can we read that last part one more time? I've been singing the same 5 notes over for thousands of years, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Let's read it again. There are only 2 or 3 human stories, and they go on repeating themselves as fiercely as if they'd never happened before. Like larks in this country that have been singing the same 5 notes over for thousands of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very Nietzsche.
It's very
Nietzsche. It's embrace the eternal return. Embrace the Balakwa who doesn't get anywhere on purgatory. Embrace the quadrillion miles. And when you fully can embrace that, then there's this resounding sort of yes
to
what is.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we come to last
one.
The last one, I do have a handful of things. I don't want to read mine all in full, but I want to read fragments from all of them. So these are quotes that you would want read at your funeral. Why don't I just go first? Because I'm sort of So I'll read the prose quote first. All right. So this is the very last sentence of George Eliot's Middlemarch. Right. And it's quite famous, so probably a lot of people will know it. But it's this: for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. All right, so I mean, it's a good quote for a funeral because it makes reference to tombs, and it also, again, refers to lives that don't seem very remarkable, right? That are just normal everyday people who will never be remembered after maybe a couple generations in their own family, right? And yet that is like literally what the whole world rests on, is just people being people every day, and there's a lot of just, I love unpacking this passage, right? So I love that she says that things are not so ill with you and me. It's not things wouldn't be so wonderful if it weren't. It's things would not be so ill, right? She's saying like, well, things could be a lot worse if people were shittier, right? Is basically what she's saying, right? And I love too that she says is half owing as well, right? So it's not all of it, right? So she's not being she's not being naive. She's not saying that that's everything, because of course there are, again, powerful people who will do their best to ruin our lives, but it's half owing to the number who who are in unvisited tombs that we don't live as shitty lives as we might have. But then I also like how she says half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life. I like how she says faithfully. Like there's a sort of faith in being decent on an everyday basis. You know what I mean? And anyway, so it's just, I love that passage, and I love Middlemarch. The other ones are all poems. I'm gonna read one of them in full, but it's short. The other two I'm gonna read fragments of. So I'll start with a poem that I considered picking for the prompt about memorizing poems, because I do have it memorized. I could just recite it, but I have the book. I'm only gonna read the first 2 lines because it's one of my favorite quotes ever. But the first 2 lines are just, "You only love when you love in vain." And I didn't say, this is from a poem called Ode to Joy by the Czech poet Miroslav Holub. And I just love this quote. I think about it all the time. You only love when you love in vain. All love is in vain, It could have also counted for my philosophy of life. So that's the thing. There's a lot of cross-pollination between these things. The second poem, funnily enough, also from a poet from Eastern Europe. This is from a poem called Nothing Twice by the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska. Where the poem is called Nothing Twice. And the individual quote that I will read is just the first stanza. So here it is. Nothing can ever happen twice. In consequence, the sorry fact is that we arrive here improvised and leave without the chance to practice. Again, very kind of pessimistic, but still life-affirming. You know what I mean? I think it's a common theme in a lot of my own, in a lot of yours and my quotes today. My last poem is I want to read it in full because it's a bit of a lighter poem. I feel like it's a bit more lighthearted, but it still has these morbid undertones. So this is a really fun short poem by James Merrill, and it's called Body. But in the way that the poem is printed, the letters of the word are all spaced apart, so it looks like BODY, right? But they're lowercase as well, right? So it's Body by James Merrill. And I don't think it's a poem about death, but you could interpret it that way. All right. So it's a poem about the word body. So here it goes. Look closely at the letters. Can you see entering stage right, then floating full, then heading off so soon? How like a little coal-rimmed moon, O plots her course from B to D, as Y, unanswered, knocks at the stage door. Looked at too long, words fail, phase out. Ask, now that body shines no longer, by what light you learn these lines, and what the B and D stood for. And it just has James Merrill's wit, you know. Like I just this is why I love James Merrill, right? It's like I love like when he says O plots her course from B to D, right? Like a coal-rimmed moon. I don't even know what the word coal means. It's coal spelled Kohl. Coal-rimmed moon, O plots her course from B to D. As Y, as in the letter Y, unanswered, knocks at the stage door. And those references to, you know, shuffling off stage right, stage left. I love it. Kind of invokes that the speech from Shakespeare, right? All the world's a stage, all the men and women are lead players, so on and so forth. And then that passage goes into like gets very morbid near the end, right? The second childhood where someone is old and decrepit. And they also kind of, even though it doesn't end with a question mark, it does sort of end with a question, right? It's saying ask. It's telling you to ask. Now that body shines no longer, as in I interpret as referring to death. Now that body shines no longer, by what light you learn these lines, and what the B and D stood for. Like, what does it stand for, right? And it doesn't take a stand. It just tells you to ask. No, so
It's a beautiful poem.
yeah. So those are some quotes I think I might like read at my funeral. How about you?
Okay, so Khalil Gibran, the prophet.
Oh, nice.
I read Khalil Gibran as being, I don't think it's controversial, but someone can tell me if they disagree. But I don't read him as being believing in any doctrinal religious perspective. And when he uses the word God in his poetry and the prophet, I read him as talking about sort of the not like the Abrahamic God of the Bible, but as a much more capacious word that means basically, you know, all of reality and all of existence. So that's how I read him. So Gibran says, "For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. What is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing." And I find that really beautiful. Another metaphor, which I think Khalil Gibran is drawing from, is he makes a similar metaphor. I think it's basically the same metaphor, which is this metaphor of like the wave in the ocean. You know, we are these sort of like waves that sort of emerge from the sea of nature, from the sea of reality, and in that there's a dissolving back into that. There's a returning to that ocean, and I think this language is beautiful. What is
Yep.
it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You know, he calls it seeking God unencumbered, and yeah, I find that very very compelling.
Yeah. No, I actually coincidentally I reread The Prophet earlier this year. Yeah, and it's a good read. Yeah, he also had a tough life. Well, I mean, he moved from Lebanon to the United States and came here and was picked on for speaking weirdly because he had an accent. Also, like his parents died when he was very young. I think a couple of his siblings died. His older sister had to work to allow him to keep going to school. So he like Nietzsche was a guy who experienced a lot of pain in his life. Maybe not physical pain necessarily, but definitely personal for
Yeah.
a while.
I love The Prophet. I also reread it recently, and I'm very, very affected by the book.
Yeah.
I have another quote.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is the last one I have. It's from Rumi. It's a short Rumi poem. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in the grass, when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. I think it's a beautiful poem. I think out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. I think that is the same place that Nietzsche is writing from in Beyond Good and Evil. He says, I see it as we're burdened in this life with this burden of right and wrong, of good and bad, of self-control, of good and evil. And in death, I think there's sort of like this pointing to the fact that there's something beyond that, which is a place beyond good and evil, a place beyond right and wrong, where everything is accepted. I think it's the perspective that I think Walt Whitman is writing from. I think Nietzsche is writing from. I think Rumi is writing from. I think Khalil Gibran is writing from. And so I'm sort of affected by that.
yeah. No, it's very reminiscent of the very end of Song of Myself. Actually, it reminded me of because the last line of Song of Myself is "I stopped somewhere waiting for you." I think.
Yeah.
Very sing. And
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good poem. I'm currently reading through Rumi's poems, so I hope to come across that poem at some point. Um, anyway, this was a great discussion.
Super fun.
I do want to tag someone. I'm gonna tag Hannah of Hannah's Books. So whenever I know you're recovering from surgery, but whenever you feel like you have the energy and time and so on to do this tag, I would love to know what if with you would get. So.
Yeah. I should do a shout out to Sailing Through Books for a lovely tag. I think Sailing Through Books and I both have a deep love of quotes and quotations. And I love that the friendship prompt, among others, I thought that really was a beautiful prompt in here. And yeah, I think of Sailing Through Books as a friend, even though it's only through BookTube. So thank you so much for this lovely tag.
Yeah, tagging us. Thank you. Thank you to Sally for your books, and thank you to Ami for doing the tag.